Welcome. Why don't we stand and sing together?
Come and stand before your Maker, full of wonder, full of fear. Come behold his power and glory, yet with confidence draw near. For the one who holds the heavens and commands the stars above is the God who lives to bless us with an unrelenting love. Rejoice! Come and lift your hands and raise your voice. He's worthy of all praise. Rejoice. Sing the mercies of your King. Trembling. Rejoice. We are children of the promise, the beloved of the Lord, one with everlasting kindness, but with sacrificial blood. Bringing reconciliation to a world that longs to know the affections of a Father who will never let them go. Rejoice! Come and lift your hands and raise your voice. He's worthy of all praise. Rejoice! Sing the mercies of your King and trembling. Rejoice! All our sickness, all our sorrow, Jesus carried up the hill. He has walked this path before us, and he's walking with us still. Turning tragedy to triumph, turning agony to praise. There is blessing in the battle, so take heart and stand amazed. Rejoice! When you cry to him, he hears your voice. He will wipe away your tears. Rejoice! In the midst of suffering, he will help you sing. Rejoice! Come and lift your hands and raise your voice. He's worthy of all praise. Rejoice! Sing the mercies of your King and trembling. Rejoice!
Hey, how you guys doing tonight? Everybody doing all right? Beautiful, beautiful February evening. We're gonna have a great time tonight. We're actually gonna celebrate communion, and we're gonna do it a little earlier than we sometimes do. We're gonna do it as part of our time of musical worship. So if you didn't grab some communion elements on your way in, you could grab them now, because we're gonna do that in just a minute. And we're gonna keep on singing. You guys up for that?
I was buried beneath my shame. And who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. And I was breathing but not alive. And all my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that
I needed rescue.
I needed rescue, my sin was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. You called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. It's when you called my name. I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, to your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, to your glorious day. My heart to your door. All my regret fades with each day. And that's what your mercy is for. Nothing but kindness is all that you've shown. I call you Father, you call me your own. Wandered, welcome me home. Nothing but kindness. Though your love is quick to forgive, believes I can be so much more. Oh, and my past behind me at last. That's what forgiveness is for. Nothing but kindness is all that you've shown. I call you Father, you call me your own. When I have wandered, welcome me home. Nothing but kindness.
The lyrics to that song, the idea of that song is actually taken from one of the most famous stories that Jesus ever told. The story of a son who broke all of the rules, broke his father's heart. And the way Jesus tells the story, this kid is about as bad of a human being as a person could probably become. The people listening to the story are finding themselves just detesting this guy after what he does to his dad. But then the twist in the story comes when he hits rock bottom and he decides, really against all odds, to go back to his father and just see if there could be any mending. And the amazing part of the story is that as the kid returns to the father, he's met with nothing but kindness, nothing but grace, nothing but love and forgiveness and celebration and embrace. He's required to do nothing to make up for it all, to correct his mistakes, to earn it back. It's shocking. And the reason why, there's a reason why, and it has to do with the longer arc of the story of Jesus, which is really the story of God's relationship with us. And that is that the dad absorbs the cost of the son's atrocities and failures upon himself. And that's the punchline to the story of Jesus. In a couple of weeks, we're going to dive into this, the surprising story of Jesus as told by Mark. And one of the things that makes Jesus so surprising is the way he treats people who seem so far away from God, and he treats them like they're not far away at all. And to really religious people around him, it feels like he's cheapening it. It feels like he's making it too easy. But as the story ends, as Jesus is betrayed and beaten and killed on a Roman cross, we discover there was nothing cheap or easy about it. That grace was costly. And as Jesus hangs on that cross, like the dad in the story, he absorbs upon himself all of the failures and atrocities and sin and darkness and pain of our world, like some great cosmic black hole. The gravity, the weight of his goodness and glory takes it all off of us, lifts it off of us upon him so that we could live free of it, so that we could rise above it. And that's what we celebrate when we celebrate communion, as we take this inside ourselves. And that's why, as we celebrate communion, we're going to sing this next song, Great Are You, Lord, because God's greatness was never so clearly seen as when he hung on a cross for us. His great love, the greatness of his character was most clearly seen in that moment. And so tonight we are going to celebrate communion as we sing this next song in this moment of just embracing God's grace and kindness and forgiveness. You were handed one of these packets of elements on your way in. If you lift off the cellophane just at the very top, there's a small little wafer of bread. And the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it as the disciples had a meal together. And he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Let's take the bread together. Then as you peel off the foil that's just under that, later on in the meal, he took a cup. He said, "This cup," is an amazing statement, "is the blood of a new covenant between God and humans. Do this in remembrance of me." Let's take the cup together. Heavenly Father, we can only thank you for nothing but kindness, for grace and forgiveness, for healing, for redemption, for lifting off of us all of our shame and heartache and brokenness and dysfunction, taking it upon yourself so that we could actually rise above it and live free of it. We embrace that tonight. We take that inside ourselves to make it real and a part of us. And we declare as we do, "Great are you, Lord." Let's sing together.
You give life, you are love, you bring life darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give light, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Let's sing all the earth. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you, oh, to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, and great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. We're so grateful for your love and your kindness towards us, God. We want to pour everything that we've got out. Just leave it all on the floor tonight in praise of you. Amen. Well,
before you grab a seat, would you take a second just to say hi to somebody on your way down and then check out the screens?
Oh, yeah, that's our next series beginning next weekend. I'm so pumped. I can hardly wait. The surprising story of Jesus as told by one of his eyewitnesses that you've probably heard of before, a guy named Peter or St. Peter, Simon Peter, probably heard of him, but then passed on through one of the very first followers of Jesus. He was actually a junior hire in the story named John Mark, and we're going to be deep diving into Mark's story via Peter, his story of Jesus leading into Easter. I'm so excited. And this is going to be a great, great series to invite somebody to bring some friends to, because you know people who are trying to figure God out and life out and things out right now. You know people like that. And some of them may even feel like they're far from God, maybe feel like they're very, very far from God. And one of the most surprising things to them in this world might be to discover that they're actually not far at all, that you're never really far from God. He is right here. Like, it's just going to be such a great story. So please, you have sitting around you some of these invite cards. We have a bunch of them. So take these, grab this, don't leave it on the seat with you. Take a few of them. We got more on the information table outside. Set them out at your work, put them on your apartment complex bulletin board, pass them out to friends, and it's going to be a fantastic series. That's beginning next week. I'm so excited. But hey, welcome, by the way, welcome to Terra Nova. My name is John, and I just want to thank you for being here with us online or with us in the room, and especially if you're our guest, you're checking things out or checking us out, again, either in person or online. Thank you so much for, did I say on the line? I said on the line. Okay, boomer. Online on the World Wide Web. Thank you for joining us. So there's no real smooth transition out of that, is there? But thank you for spending part of your weekend with us. When you came in, you were handed one of these. We call it the weekend program. If you take it out and check it out, you'll see there's all things Terra Nova going on in here. There's this big serving menu. This is our season right now, this month, February, to join the team that makes God's love famous together around here. Take a look at that. We've got a barbecue coming up in a couple of weeks. That's fun, right? There's a one-step ministry tea and fashion show. One step is our ministry to single parent families and being raised by a single parent mom. And some of us we know the challenge that is, especially if you have really bad kids like I was. And so, not that any of our single parent families do, but my mom did. So on your chairs right next to that card for the series next week, you'll have these cards that you can take that help you sign up for that. And so anyway, all of that's on there. But what I was really trying to get us to is right here towards the back. There's this perforated flap, and I'd love to have you take a second and tear it off with me right now and grab that pen sitting next to you and take a moment and fill it out. Just let us know who you are. If it's your first or second or third time around here, love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking a moment to let us know a little bit about you. There's places on here where you can check off information you might be interested in finding something about. And then there's this wonderful spot on the back where you can let us know how things are just going in your week, in your life, how we can be praying for you. And we read through these every single weekend. We pray for you all the time, every week. So thank you for taking a second. And in fact, even if you're just throwing your name on that and throwing it in the offering basket later, that's kind of fun too, because it just reminds us, oh yeah, great to see them. So take a moment and be working on that. But hey, we are in part 3 right now of a series that we've been in called How Not to Be Your Own Worst Enemy. And I think whenever we see a phrase like that, there's probably somebody that comes to mind. Maybe it's you, yourself, but maybe there's someone who comes to mind and they did it up big, right? They made some decisions where in one area of their lives, or maybe in many areas of their lives, they just really destroyed some stuff. And you thought to yourself, and I think whenever we see that, I think we can all relate to thinking to ourselves, well, I would never do that. I would never be that dumb. I would never be that self-destructive. Can't they see like what they're doing and where that's going to go? But the truth is, we actually all have the potential, if not the propensity, to become at times our own worst enemy. And here's how I know that's true of you, and it's definitely true of me, because after all, we have all participated in all of our own bad decisions. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. You're the genius behind your worst moves. I'm the mastermind behind my biggest regrets and worst mistakes, and so are you. And the reason why that's a big deal is because a single bad decision is always the first step toward becoming your own worst enemy. A single bad decision is always the first step towards becoming your own worst enemy. Every habit begins with the first time. Every journey begins with a first step. And in those moments, the thing is, we can almost never see it. We almost never see it for what it is going to be. And that's why in this series, we're talking about 3 preemptive habits. Preemptive because we're usually becoming our own worst enemy before we realize that we are. 3 preemptive habits that if we will do these 3 things regularly, they will keep us from becoming our own worst enemy. And the first preemptive habit 2 weeks ago, you remember what preemptive habit number 1 is? Just yell it out if you remember what it was. Preemptive habit number 1? Play the movie. And play the movie means never see any individual action as an isolated thing in and of itself. Any one decision I make, anything that I'm doing right now is actually a part of the longer story of my life, the longer movie, if you will, of my life. And to really understand the implications of that decision and what it's going to mean, I have to play that movie forward. I have to play it all the way to the end. Not just the immediate cause and effect, we said, not just if A, then B, and that's actually a leap forward to it for us many times. Not just if A, then B, but the ripple effect. The ripple effect. If A, then B, then C, then D. How will this ripple out the unintended consequences of this decision? And there are always unintended consequences. Can I foresee how this is going to affect everything else when I do this or I make this choice? How will this story play out? Now, wise people are doing this all the time. They're doing this all the time in every facet of their lives: business, financial, relationships. It's like they're playing out how their choices will ripple and affect other things in their lives. They just kind of naturally do that. But we ended week 1 saying there is a major reason why play the movie doesn't actually work. It doesn't actually work. And in fact, it may be completely unhelpful for you entirely. And the reason why is because, and there is so much research on this. See, here's the thing about me, and here's the thing about you. We all lie. And we all lie a lot. And the person we lie to the most, ourselves. Yeah, we all lie. We lie a lot, and especially to ourselves specifically. We lie to ourselves about what it is actually that we're doing, what it is that we really want, why we're doing it, why we want it, and how it will play out, the ripple effect. And we all struggle with something we talked about last week called terminal uniqueness. This idea like, I know that's what happened to them, but that's not going to happen to me. I know mom, I know dad. I know that's what happens to other people when they do that, but that's not going to happen to me because I'm unique. I'm special. I'll be able to contain it, control it, I'll be able to, manage my way through this so that those results don't happen to me. And we lie to ourselves, and we lie to ourselves about our own story and how our story is playing out. And that's why preemptive habit number 2 was so important that we talked about last week. What was preemptive habit number 2? If you know it, just yell it out. What was it? Tell the truth. Play the movie and tell the truth. While you're playing the movie, you got to tell the truth, at least to yourself. At least to yourself. I'm not saying you have to tell everybody else the truth, but here's the thing. In other words, even if you're going to lie to the rest of us about what you're doing and why you're doing it, even if I'm going to lie to you about how rosy it all is and how unique I am and how this will play out, you don't understand, and this isn't going to affect anything, and the future won't be negatively affected by my decisions right now. No, you don't know. If I'm going to spin and justify and paint rosy pictures for you, at least I should tell myself the truth. At least you should tell yourself the truth. So we made this promise last week as we ended. We're going to throw it up on the screen. And I thought we read this out loud a couple of times last week. I thought we would read it out loud again tonight. Let's read this out loud together. I will not lie to myself, even when the truth makes me feel bad about myself. I'm not going to lie to myself. Play the movie, and tell the truth, at least to yourself. Now, these first two habits are, in a way, defensive habits. When you think about it, they're kind of defensive strategies. But tonight, as we wind down the series, we are going to talk about one more preemptive habit that actually gets you on the offensive side of not becoming your own worst enemy. A life habit that if you will keep this habit, it will not only help you avoid becoming your own worst enemy, but I guarantee you, it will help you become your own best friend. So let's jump into part 3 of how not to be your own worst enemy.
Well, hey, it is great to be with you guys. My name is Scott, and I have to say that I'm coming out of a really busy shopping season, okay? So the way the calendar works for me, here's what the last couple months have been like. So we have December, we've got Christmas. My daughter's got a birthday right around there. We hit the new year. It's my dad's birthday, got my father-in-law's birthday. Mom's birthday is at the beginning of this month. And we got Valentine's Day. And then my wife's birthday is this weekend. So I got to figure that out right now too, okay? So lots of opportunities to come up with gifts, lots of time where we got to shop. And when it comes down to it, I have this love-hate relationship with shopping. Some of you have it as well. I love when people shop for me. I hate to shop for other people, right? So there's that type of thing. And so when it comes down to shopping, and I think of like my earliest memories, it's situations like this, where I'm at like a department store, and I was like in a stroller, or I was hanging out with my parents, and it was just this feeling of, man, this is absolutely boring. And so I would hide in those racks of clothes. There were countless other children in there as well. I don't really know what was going on, but that was my refuge. Shopping was just absolutely boring. But then there were times where we would go to like a different store, a store like this, where it was like a toy store, Toys R Us. And the moment that we would go to Toys R Us, I would think, okay, this is intriguing. Like, this is going to be exciting. But we often did not go there to shop for me. It was going, hey, there's a friend of yours that has a birthday coming up, and so we need to get a gift for them. And so then that spot was, well, this is just tempting. Like, this is difficult because there's a lot of things in there that I want that, like, man, it would be great to get those, but we're not doing that for me right now, are we? And so it just felt like that. It felt tempting. over the last few decades, you guys are aware that the way we shop has changed so drastically. And so now the image I get when it comes to shopping is a little bit different. It's not those brick and mortar stores. It's kind of like this, where I think of just my screen, my device, and the ways that I shop for things online. And probably many of you shop that way as well. And I just think, man, this is absolutely amazing, because shopping like that, the convenience, the ease, the comfort, the speed of all of that, it is wild. It's crazy that we don't have to leave our homes. We don't even have to put on pants to go shopping now. And you don't have to deal with the crowded shopping centers and the rude people and the parking lots and all of that. And it is so convenient. And if you've had experience where you've shopped online, then this is probably going to be something that you're familiar with, where maybe you haven't checked out yet, or you haven't closed the app on your phone. But before you do, you're met with some suggestions. Suggestions like these of hey, I know you're going to get that, but may we also suggest? Or people who bought those items also bought. Or this one, it's complete the collection with the following items, right? It's this way for us to be aware that there are other things out there that we don't have yet, and we should get those, because once we do, things will be much better for us. But the thing they don't know about us is that you and I are smart. And we're not going to fall for that. They're not going to get us with those types of things. We buy it because we want it, not because that bot or that algorithm told me to, right? And so I wonder if in the middle of this process where we're always surrounded by this consumer culture, if we ever just kind of find ourselves you're really caught up in this current of culture when it comes to a myth that so many people in our society believe. And the myth goes something like this. It's that my life will be better. My life will be like just more satisfying. I'll feel just richer. I'll feel more content. My life will be more enjoyable when I get, and then we have the creativity to fill in the blanks with whatever it is for us, right? My life will be better when I get that product, because I have the old one, but I don't have the new one yet. So my life will be better when I get that product, or my life will be better when I finally get that promotion, because they don't recognize me. And so if I got the recognition that I deserve, well, my life would be better. And it would also be better if I got the raise that goes along with that promotion. And my life would be better if I weren't just trapped right here at home, but I got to go on the vacations that they get to go on and take those types of pictures as well. Like, my life would be better if I had that dream man, that dream woman. My life would be better if my kids didn't do this, but instead they were more like those kids. My life would be better if I got those things, because then I would have what I want, and then I would be happy. Throughout the scriptures, we see just this wealth of wisdom that comes through in so many different settings. Sometimes we read about them in parables, or other times in stories, sometimes even through letters or epistles that are written. But probably the best collection of wisdom comes from the Book of Proverbs. And there are a number of different contributors to the Book of Proverbs, but the main voice behind it, the primary voice, is a man named Solomon. And Solomon was known in his day as the wisest person who had ever lived. And in light of that reputation, we might be a little bit caught off guard when we read another collection of his writings. It's the Book of Ecclesiastes. And we see what he opens that book with in the first chapter as he reflects on life. He begins and he says, everything is meaningless, says the teacher. It's just completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Everything is wearisome, beyond description. No matter how much we see, we're just never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we're not content. And he goes along and he says, I observed everything going on under the sun, and really, it's all meaningless. It's like chasing the wind. And you've met people before where they have a strong opinion, a strong take on something. And one of the things that you figured out is that more often than not, when people say very strongly opinionated things, that there's a story behind it. Where you go, okay, you believe that with so much of yourself because something happened along the way to convince you that that must be true, which then begs the question, if this is where Solomon's at, and he was known as like the wisest person who had ever lived, then what's his story? Well, beyond being the wisest person of his day, Solomon was also the richest, the most powerful, the most influential person as well. See, Solomon was a guy who he had it all and then some. And in fact, throughout the rest of the book of Ecclesiastes, what you see is you catch him reflecting on all that he had. I mean, he had amusement and he had recreation and he had property and he had riches and he had food and he had drink and he had sex and he had power and he had everything that could be attained. But you also see him continually going back to this same conclusion. He's saying, hey, no matter what I had, no matter what I did to make my life about getting what I wanted, it was never enough for me. And so in Ecclesiastes 2, verses 9 through 11, he says, okay, so I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me. In my wisdom, it never failed me, because anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. You know people who live like that. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. But as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. And I wonder if you've ever had a moment where you've encountered somebody who has come to a place in their life where they have responded similarly, where they have looked at all that they have, and they are just dissatisfied with all of the things that were supposed to satisfy them. Or maybe it's not another person, but you go, you know what, there is a moment or a season in my life, and maybe you're there now, where you felt like, you know what, I played by all the rules that everybody's supposed to play by, and then here I am, and I'm supposed to be happier than I am right now. Or maybe even a bit empty. Like I've got this appetite, and no matter what I feed it, there's nothing that's going to satisfy it. And if so, if you've ever felt that way or known people who have been in that boat, we're not, by no means alone. In fact, researchers refer to this experience as the Hedonic Treadmill. The Hedonic Treadmill. Maybe you've heard of it before, maybe not, maybe it's new, but here's a brief explanation of the theory. This is backed by tons of research, and it says that shortly after every high we experience, which the high could be, hey, an achievement, it could be something that you purchased, it could be a new relationship, but shortly after every high that we experience, our brains have a way of resetting to a baseline level of happiness. Or in other words, that despite the belief that if I just had those better circumstances, those things that I've always wanted, to go to the places that I've wanted to go, if I have those things, I'll be more content. Despite that, I can't get it because my brain and your brain will continually add greater and new levels of expectation that are further and further out of reach and more difficult to satisfy. And that just sounds so frustrating. Like we are wired that way, where no matter what we have, we're always longing for something more. And even though this research came out long after the days of Solomon, my imagination is that if we were to share this with him and just say, hey, guess what? No matter what you get, you're always going to want more. He would stare at us and go, well, yeah, duh. Like, I could have told you that. I tried to tell you that. I lived that life where I realized that when I tried to make my life about my life, I ruined my life. I became my own worst enemy. And yet so many people live this way as well. Because sometimes it feels like it's just kind of the only way to live. Well, about 1,000 years after Solomon's life, Jesus emerges and he begins his public ministry. And with that, we see Jesus, and he is teaching in a way that nobody's ever taught before, with the authority of God. He is performing these miracles, and not just miracles, they're these signs that point to God. They point to who he is. And he's demonstrating this brand new way of living. And all of this comes under what's referred to as the kingdom of heaven. It's the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. And it's this new way of living. It's what it means to be a person or what it means to be a community of people who are living out the desires of their heavenly Father, and they're extending his reign, not just in their lives, but to the world around them. But the thing about the kingdom is that as Jesus is teaching about it, as he's living it out, the people who are seeing that are recognizing that this kingdom, it's completely backwards. It's completely upside down. And so as he's preaching, there are people in his society, and in their life, they had always been told that they had little to no worth. And now they're recognizing that in the kingdom of heaven, they had just unimaginable, immense worth. Or the people that, as we're going to be diving into a little bit more in the weeks to come, who had always been told, you know what, There are people who belong in relationship with God, people who are accepted, but then you are people who, you know what, you're kind of too far from God. And these people believe that with the kingdom of heaven, they now had hope that was an extension to them as well. With the kingdom of heaven, the goals and standards for living had new focus and clarity. And in this kingdom, as Jesus is telling them what it looks like and how to live it out, he begins to teach some things that redefined reality and success. And they weren't just like kind of creative. They probably went beyond sounding counterintuitive, but to his original audience, they looked at him and said, that is laughable. Like, nobody is going to live that way. And so many of these ideas focused on the aim of one's life. And so we see time and time again throughout the teaching of Jesus, words like this, words in Mark chapter 8, verses 35 to 36, where he says, hey, you know what? So if you live in such a way where you try to hang on to your life, you're going to lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you'll save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world? Like if you spend your life trying to get and to receive and accumulate, but then you lose your own soul in the process. Or in Matthew chapter 20, where he's talking with his disciples and he's saying, okay, there is a way in our world where people who have power or influence, they lead, but among you, among my followers, it's going to be so different. Because whoever wants to be a leader, if you want to be somebody who's really setting the tone in this kingdom, you're going to be a servant. And if you want to be like the greatest, then you're going to live your life as a slave for others. Because look at me, even I, the Son of Man, I did not come to demand people to live their lives for me, to demand people to serve me, but I came to give my life as a ransom for many. Or on Jesus' last night with his disciples, as he washes their feet, he then gives them these words. He says, love each other in the same way that I have loved you. Because there's no greater love than a sacrificial love, than a love that says, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down my life, not for me and my kingdom, but for others. And that is a different approach. Instead of a self-focused, self-absorbed way of living that ends up leaving us exhausted and disappointed, well, we take a different path. And it's this kingdom way. It's the way where we use what we've been given to make life better for those around us. We use what we've been given to make life better for those around us. And as Jesus is teaching about this kingdom and living it out, he's attracting a crowd in the process. So initially, what Jesus has got is he's got his 12 disciples. But as time goes by, there is this crowd that's nearby, right? And the crowd loves being the crowd because, well, it's great to be the crowd. It means that when Jesus is teaching, well, they get to listen. And that when Jesus is performing miracles where he's feeding thousands of people, it means that they're eating, and it means that when Jesus is healing people, they're healing their sick friends who they brought to Jesus. And for months and months and maybe even years, this crowd is going, man, it is so nice to be receiving from Jesus. It is so nice to be getting poured into. And they are enjoying that life. But now what happens is today they're going to be invited into a next step from Jesus. And that picks up in Luke chapter 10. We're going to look at verse 1. The Lord now chose 72 other disciples, and he sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places that he planned to visit. These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his field. And now go, and remember that I am sending you out as lambs among wolves. And so on this day, Jesus takes these 72, he divides them into pairs, and he says, guess what? Guess what? Now it's your turn. Now you're going to go, and you are going to take what you've received, take what I've poured into you, and you are going to pass that along because there is this great opportunity. There's a great harvest in front of you. And he assures them, he says, you know what? It's going to be risky, though. I got to tell you that it's going to be a little bit dangerous, but playing it safe is never any fun anyway. So head out to the places that I'm about to go to, and you're going to go there ahead of me, and you're going to be my representatives or my ambassadors. And in the verses that follow, Jesus ends up giving them these instructions, gives them this mission, and it's best summed up in this line in verse 9, where he says, heal the sick and tell them, the kingdom of God is near you now. The kingdom of God is near you now. And as I think through this, I think about the opportunity that they had. I try to put myself in their shoes. As I've been a part of this crowd where I've seen Jesus from a distance, I'm seeing him teach, I'm listening to that, I'm going, wow, this is amazing. And then on that day, Jesus says to me, he says, okay, so what I want you to do is to go out. And I wonder, what would I do if I were in their shoes? I wonder if there are some of them who were there and they nodded, like didn't even flinch. They're like, if you say so, I'll go for it. And then I wonder if there are others who try to kind of talk themselves out of it. And they're like, well, here's the thing is, like, I just don't feel like I'm ready. I mean, Jesus, I've only been with you for this limited amount of time. I don't know enough. And you know what, I'm kind of scared. Jesus, do you even know what I was doing before you spent time with me? I just don't think I'm ready to go. And when it comes down to it, sometimes those are responses that I think we can relate to. When we are tasked with the opportunity of sharing who Jesus is with other people in our lives, sometimes we just say, you know what, not for me. I'm not ready to do that. But the reality is with Jesus, we are never responsible for filling another person's cup, but simply emptying our own. And so the 72, well, they went for it. They took a risk, and we see their return in Luke chapter 10, verse 17. When the 72 disciples returned, they joyfully reported to him, Lord, even the demons obey us when we use your name. Like they're ecstatic. The disciples, they're filled with joy and they're pumped because what had happened is on that day they took a risk, and after being poured into, this crowd decided, you know what I'm going to do is I'm not going to let what Jesus poured into me stay with me. And so they emptied their cup into other people, and they are finding this joy in the process. And so Jesus responds with it, and he says, yes, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. Look, I have given you authority over all the power of the enemy, and you can walk among snakes and scorpions and crush them, which, by the way, sounds pretty cool. Nothing will injure you, he says, but don't rejoice because evil spirits obey you. Rejoice because your names are registered in heaven. And so as they go out, as they've taken what they've received and passed it along, Jesus says, yeah, you did it. And when I ask you to do something, you can have the confidence that I'm going to equip you with what you need to make that a possibility. But make sure that you don't miss out. Make sure that you do not find your joy or find your worth in this new position that you have or your influence there, but instead find your joy and your worth from the identity and belonging that you have from being a part of this kingdom, from being a part of the kingdom of heaven. Well, seeing the crowd go and be obedient, emptying their cups, it left Jesus filled with joy as well. Verse 21. At that same time, Jesus was filled with the joy of the Holy Spirit, and he said, "Oh, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, thank you. Thank you for hiding these things from those who think themselves so wise and clever, and for revealing them to the childlike, those who actually have faith. Yes, Father, it pleased you to do it this way." He's saying, God, this is exactly the way you wanted it. He's saying, okay, these people who are part of the crowd, they actually get it. They understand what the wise in this world haven't been able to grasp, that it's not about living for themselves, but continuing to pour themselves out to pass the kingdom along. And it leads us to this big observation, a recognition that for you and I, that I will become my own worst enemy when I make my life about my life. We become our own worst enemy when we use all that we have to accumulate. We become our own worst enemies when we make our priorities all about ourselves. We become our own worst enemies when we structure our relationships in ways that are only going to be self-serving, when our focus is on holding on to rather than passing along, when our concern is how much we can get rather than using what we have and giving it to others. We become our own worst enemy when faith or God or church revolves all around ourselves and us just filling up and having more and more and more and never being moved to look to pour out to those around us. But the recognition is that, well, we don't live that way. That followers of Jesus don't make our lives about our lives. We don't create a church community that's only good for us and doesn't bring life and good news to others. And this is the result when we do something powerful, when we recognize that we're in this current And everybody's got these lenses on, where everybody's looking at things through a lens of consumption, right? We see things and we go, okay, what can I get? What can I hold on to? What is there for me? And instead, we take that off and we look at things through a lens of contribution, rather than recognizing, okay, you know what? I want this to be about myself. We say, how can I use what I've received and use that to serve others? Because we recognize that when we're consumers, we're always on this treadmill and it's only picking up speed and we're going to be exhausted. But when we contribute, we find joy in having our mission and our identity wrapped up in this kingdom, in this cause, in this work, where we're bringing hope, we're bringing joy, we're bringing reconciliation, we're bringing truth to the people around us. And that leads us to this preemptive habit number 3, which is to empty the cup. See, we empty the cup because we don't want to end up exhausted and disappointed like Solomon was as he got to the end of his life. And we empty the cup because we don't want to do what Jesus said and attempting to gain the whole world, but actually losing ourselves, forfeiting our souls in the process. And we empty the cup because that's what Jesus did for us, and that's what he instructs his followers to do. And as we do so, one of the really cool things is that we know that Jesus' words, that it is better to give than to receive, aren't just like a cool little pep talk, but they're actually scientific. And I'm not going to go into a ton of depth on this, and I'm sure that many of you are actually really familiar with the ways that research has identified the connection between happiness or contentment and selflessness. And so, for instance, there's this study that was out of the UK where they looked at 20 years worth of people who were regularly serving or volunteering. And then they compared that with people who were not. And as they looked at the lives of those who were regularly volunteering, they saw lower levels of depression, of heart disease, stress, and drug use, and actually higher levels of well-being, self-esteem, physical health, and quality of life. And you look at that and you're like, oh, I want all of these things. What do I do? And as they did the research, they went, that is actually tied to people who have made their lives not about their lives, but serving others. Or Dr. Stephen Post, he leads a research institute and they've worked with over 50 different universities. And they've looked at the links between acts of compassion and personal satisfaction. So he wrote this is great. He says, the remarkable bottom line of the science of love is that giving protects overall health twice as much as aspirin protects against heart disease. He continues, the benefits of compassion to your physical health alone are so strong that if compassion was not free, pharmaceutical companies would herald the discovery of, and then he says, you can go to the next one, a stupendous new drug, this would be great, a stupendous new drug called Give Back instead of Prozac, and they would run TV ads about the power of compassion to enhance your life. And we look at that and we go, well, yeah, it just makes sense. It makes sense that people are finding satisfaction and enjoyment through serving others, through loving others well, but at the same time, it seems so backwards. It seems so strange to us because instinctively, we look around and we believe that the more we get for ourselves, the better that life will be, but that's just not the case, and it's also not the way of Jesus. And so armed with this knowledge, what we do is we go back to week 1 of the series, and we play the movie. And in that process, we ask ourselves these questions that help us make these really character-defining decisions. And so, for instance, we look at this and we go, okay, if I live this way, what is this way? Let's say the lens of consumption, if I live this way where I'm making everything about myself and what I can get and what I can hold on to, and I'm using that relationship for my benefit, and I'm living that way, where does it get me in the long run? Not just what's the next step and how do I get ahead initially, but where does that lead me on, not just point A to B, but all the way to Z? Or what story would I want to tell about this? I've got a choice in front of me. What's the better story? What's the story that I'm going to be more proud of? Or how about this, especially in light of this topic? So if I live this way, and you can think again, which way are we choosing? Okay, how about this? If I live the way where I don't make my life about my life, but instead I use what I have. I use resources, I use relationships, I use skills, I use abilities, I use what I have to serve other people. Okay, if I begin to do that and I actually take it seriously, what's going to be the ripple effect into the lives of those around me? Okay, so how is that going to change my relationships? What will my work life be like? And what will that be like for my coworkers? What will that be like in my neighborhood? And what will that be like in my family life? How is that ripple effect going to change the lives of your children and the future generations when we decide, you know what, I'm not making this about myself, but instead I'm going to use everything that I've been given to make life better for those around me? Will it lead me towards the type of character I want to have? Or is that going to prevent me from being the person that I want to become? And this is so important to ask these types of questions, specifically for this topic, because there is always a short-term cost when it comes to serving others or living sacrificially. There's always this short-term or immediate inconvenience or frustration that comes when I go, okay, there's something I want, and instead I'm going to say no to that in order to actually not serve myself, but serve other people. Okay, so that's going to immediately lead me to a point of frustration. But if I play out the movie, I go, where does that take me? What type of character do I develop in the process? And how does that impact those around me? And again, how do I become more and more like Jesus? And so that day, as Jesus had poured himself for months or years into the crowd, and they went out and they decided that, hey, even with their inadequacies and even with those feelings of going, you know what, I don't know if I know enough or if I'm ready, they decided to then empty the cup to those who are around them. And from that point, the people who had received eventually emptied the cup as well. And this movement, this message of hope and reconciliation with God, this kingdom of heaven made its way to a man among other people, a man named Barnabas. And Barnabas decided that he was going to use his life and he was going to further the Jesus movement, and he was going to invest and encourage other people. And one of those people that he decided to invest into was a man named Saul. And so Saul, or the Apostle Paul, had received from him. And Paul had this radical transformation where he recognized, okay, the type of grace that God offers me, because I feel like of all people, I'm undeserving of that grace, that type of grace and second chance and love, that's something that's changed my life, and I need other people to know about it. And so Paul used his life to establish and to build into communities of Jesus followers or churches. And what Paul did was he invested in many people, many individuals, but specifically in some church leaders. And as he mentored different pastors, he mentored a young pastor, a guy that was named Timothy. And what he made sure to let Timothy know is that, Timothy, just as you have received your faith from me and from others, including your family members, Timothy, make sure that you share this, that you trust this with reliable people who are going to pass it on to others. And so Timothy, he does that as well. And what takes place is that over the next couple thousand years, well, something really radical happens, that there's highs and lows, but this Jesus movement, it never dies out because everybody along the way decides that this is not going to stop with me, and so they take what they've received, and in spite of their inadequacies, or in spite of the reasons why they feel like they're not ready, or they don't know enough, or I'm not sure what they're going to make of this, they continue to pass it along, and eventually this movement and this message reaches people like us. And you think back in some of your own stories, you go, okay, there was a time, and maybe when you were a kid, or maybe a youth, or maybe in your adult years, but there was somebody that made a decision to invest in us and also make sure that they emptied the cup and to pass that message along. And maybe it was a Sunday school teacher or a youth leader, or maybe it was a parent, or maybe it was an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, or maybe it was a neighbor or a coach or somebody else. But they made a decision that they would follow in the way of Jesus and not make their life about their life, but they would continue to pass along the message of the kingdom of heaven. And then that reached us. And as I look around our beautiful church, I see expressions of this all the time, of people who constantly make that decision, the decision that needs to be made all the time, because if we're not making it, we get sucked into culture. We get sucked back into that lens of consumption. And so I look around and I see people doing it right now who are investing in the faith formation of children in our Supernova Kids classrooms. Or I see people who are mentoring or discipling teens and youth in our church. I see people who invest in marriages, who invest in single-parent moms. I see people who are investing constantly, taking what they have And sometimes feeling like, hey, I've got some experience, and sometimes feeling like, you know what, I don't even know if I have that much, but making the decision to empty their cup, to pass along the message and the movement of Jesus to the other people that are there for us. Not knowing, okay, what are they going to do with it? Not believing that they are responsible for filling another person's cup or making sure that they then in turn pass along, but just saying, hey, this is what I've received, and it's not going to stop with me, and so I'm going to empty my cup. And we see that all the time. We see it happening around us. And then when that movement and that message gets to us, because of the example before us, not just by the people who are directly related to our lives, but as we look back towards the last 2,000 years of the Jesus movement, and in those original 72 who said, really, you're calling me? You want me to extend it? We go, of course, I'm going to empty my cup to that next person. And so we mentioned a little earlier that we're in the middle where we're doing something that we do a couple times a year, where we roll out volunteer or serve opportunities, and they're just ways for us to get involved and to be able to be participants in this mission. And so we use this menu. If you've got the menu, you can go ahead and pull it out right now, or if you're using your Terra Nova app, then you can pull that out as well. But this menu is what we use. It's kind of our vehicle. But let me just say this, that I've found it personally helpful, because we get into the swing of things where it's like, oh, we're doing that again. Well, that's really cool. That's good. I've found it personally helpful to remember why we do what we do. And here's the cool thing. It's that even though, as we talked about, even though research shows that when we are volunteering regularly, we're going to feel happier and healthier, that's not why we do this. It's not. It's a really cool byproduct, but that's not why we do it. And even though the experience of Solomon and countless others throughout history, it screams at us, don't make your life about your life. You will become your own worst enemy. That's actually not why we do it either. And even though, this is interesting, even though Terra Nova as a local church or as a quote-unquote organization is healthier and thriving when we've got more people making individual contributions and getting skin in the game, that's not even why we do this. We serve. We take what we've been given to make life better for those around us. We empty the cup because that's the way of Jesus. That's the way it's always been, and that's what we continue to follow in. And that's what it means to be his followers. And we find our life's mission in imitating that and building his kingdom. And so that's how we live. And in light of that, that's how this mission and movement made its way to us. And we go, well, there's no way I'm going to let this stop with me now. And so our next step for today is to do this, is to take a bit of time and look through this menu or spend some time praying and go, hey, God, what do you have for me? How can I continue to contribute to this movement? How can I take what's been poured out to me, and how do I empty my cup? How do I serve? How do I give? How do I not make my life about my life, but how do I make things better for those around me? And so if right now, as you're looking through this, you might go, you know what, there's a way or two that I could jump in and it pops out to you, is you could sign up for that. If as you're looking at it, you go, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure, or you know what, I don't even know that I want to do this. I'd encourage you to spend just a moment praying, just being honest with God. Or maybe your question is just like, I don't know which one is best for me. Make a note to talk with somebody about that. Or if you're part of the many people who have already figured out ways that you're going to jump in and contribute, and you go, hey, I'm a part of this team, continue to pray that we would do that more and more. Pray for those around us, that we have fuller teams, and so we can take our mission and our role seriously of extending and expanding the kingdom of God. You look at the menu, you see we've got sides and takeout, all sorts of things that happen in the week, things that happen on the weekend. But what we're going to do is give you a minute or two just to have with this menu out in front of you. We'll have some music that's playing in the background. But again, let's continue to decide that we will not make our lives about our lives, but instead choose to empty our cups.
Play the movie, tell the truth, empty the cup. I'm not going to make my life about my life. I'm going to see my life through the lens of what it contributes to others. I'm going to see each moment, this decision, through the lens of how this will ripple positively into others. And I'm going to take what I've been given, and I might not be able to ever fill your cup, but I'm always going to be responsible to empty mine. Play the movie, tell the truth, empty the cup. That's how not to be your own worst enemy. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As you head out, you can take this serve menu the volunteer menu that you've been working on. Again, there are just so many ways to join various teams around here and make God's love famous together. You can drop this entire thing in the basket on the way out. You can also take that Connect card that you were working on earlier, finish filling that out. You can drop this in the basket on the way out. And of course, you can drop your offering envelope on the way out into the offering basket. That's kind of a no-brainer. And you can also give online and on our app, as so many of you do, and so many of you have set up recurring giving just to help you remember doing that. So that's awesome. And then don't forget to join us next weekend and bring some friends back to you. So look around, gather up a couple of these cards. Don't leave without them. Come back next week and join us for our brand new series. So pumped about it. You're not far. The surprising study of Mark's story of Jesus. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you back next weekend for the new series.